Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Bell, Leading with Purpose, with Dr. Nathan Manley and myself, Dr. Jim Cummins. What a perfect person to have on a pre-Christmas episode. Dr. Traci Mitchell is the Assistant Superintendent of Cassville Schools. She is one of the most positive, encouraging people I've ever been around. And today she's going to talk about leadership, humility, and balance. Dr. Mitchell shares her journey from accounting to education, emphasizing servant leadership, strong work ethic, and confidentiality, as well as clear communications. She reflects on the unique role of assistant superintendents, supporting principals, navigating the superintendent transitions, and leading with empathy while maintaining consistency. The discussion also highlights sustained joy in leadership, setting healthy life-work boundaries, and remembering the why behind serving students and communities. We're excited to have Traci on this episode of Beyond the Bell, Leading with Purpose.
Welcome to Beyond the Bell, Leading with Purpose, a Lifted sponsor podcast designed to bring encouragement and support to leaders by giving light to the stories and experiences of leaders who are demonstrating leadership in action and making a positive impact every day. I'm Dr. Nathan Manley, joined by my Lifted partner, Dr. Jim Cummins. Jim, what's new in your world today?
Well, got an opportunity to visit a couple of the grandchildren this past weekend and headed next weekend to Florida to visit the others and trying to do some business in between. So staying hopping and just encouraged about the positivity that's come out of these podcasts and looking forward to seeing Traci today.
All right. I just got back from Illinois Friday, where I had the opportunity to work with some staff there on continuing their instructional model and some tier 2 support. And it's always just fills your bucket a little bit to go out there and support others and give them tools that help them be more successful. So, when Jim and I founded Lifted, our vision was simple but deeply important: to provide leadership coaching and professional development built on sustained support. We believe in walking alongside leaders for the long haul, investing them in the deep development that changes lives, both for the leaders themselves and for the people they serve. The Beyond the Bell podcast was born out of that desire to bring light to some of the best people and work out there. Today, we are honored to welcome Dr. Traci Mitchell. Jim and I have both had the pleasure of knowing Dr. Mitchell for many years, and we are excited to have her on the podcast. More than that, we're honored to call her a friend. She is truly one of the most positive and encouraging people we've ever met, and we can't wait for you to hear her story and her perspective on leadership. Traci, instead of us introducing you today, we'd love to give you the opportunity to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your current role, and what drives your work in education.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Actually, really excited about this new venture of both of you. I think this is definitely a needed resource in education today. It can be difficult in sometimes in the role. So my name's Traci Mitchell, and I am the assistant superintendent at Cassville at the moment. Been married to my husband for 36 years, and my husband is a pastor. And so I kind of get both sides of it's very interesting how closely related my job as an assistant superintendent is with his job as a pastor. There's a lot of what I do, as you probably know, is conflict resolution. When you get to this point, you're dealing a lot with personalities and people and kind of trying to be a balance in both of those worlds. So yeah, we have 6.5 grandchildren, and we have 4 children, and 2 are boys, 2 boys, 2 girls. Our boys are both in the Air Force, so they are traveling the world and kind of keeps us on our toes.
Well, thank you.
So, yeah, and I'm curious, going back to your roots a little bit, and the kids, you had wonderful kids, obviously raised very well, but share with our listeners a little bit about your story, because yours is similar to mine about going into another profession first and then coming back to education.
So yeah, that I actually, when I graduated from Missouri Southern, And at the time, about my junior year, I decided I was an accounting major. And about my junior year, I decided, hey, I wanted to be an education major. And it would have required me to kind of stay in school longer. And my husband was we were married at the time. We got married when we were 12. That's why we have 7 grandchildren already. But he did not want me going into education because he was a little bit ornery, a lot ornery in school, and did not want me to be treated the way he had treated his teachers. And since then, it's kind of humorous. He has apologized to, when he sees one of his high school teachers, he will apologize to them. And so I did go ahead and finish my accounting degree. We ended up moving to Michigan and to Arkansas with his job. He worked for Lazy Boy out in Neosho, and they ended up transferring him all over the country. And honestly, that accounting degree for me was a great decision. It's given me a background into just some finance things in my world, especially in my role now. But my kids then got in school. We had children, and I just started noticing some things that I started getting involved with in the school. I started volunteering, doing all the things. I was at school all the time. And finally, when I decided that, hey, education really is where I'm supposed to be, I really felt like I was being led that way. My husband finally said, well, are they going to pay you? Because you're up there for free. So if they're going to pay you, that's great. So my first day of school, his words to me was, please don't bring any of them home. But that actually didn't pan out. There were times I did have to, you know how it is in education. But that was really such a God thing for me. I really feel like that was, people just put those thoughts in passing. Hey, you should be a teacher. And I was like, why am I not a teacher? This is my heart. This is what I love. And so, yeah, that's the direction.
Well, I'm glad you did.
Yeah,
Me too.
And countless others are grateful for that as well. Traci, we're going to go through some questions here. First one, just tell us about, what are your strongest beliefs about leadership, and who influenced your leadership style?
I figured you were going to ask that question, or pretty much knew that. And that's hard. That is hard. I would say a lot of times, for me, it's having to be really a good communicator, having a heart that is basically humble. I know sometimes people say that if you're humble, you could be considered weak, and that is so not true. I think being humble means that you understand where your strengths and where your weaknesses lie. It's being able to listen to others' ideas, having that, I know, that servant's mindset, having a servant's heart, but really it is being able to have. So my strongest belief about leadership is you have to have a good work ethic. You have to be able to work harder than the people around you, or they're not going to trust that you have their best interest in mind. And sometimes work ethic is really hard to find these days. It really is. People that are sometimes going into education think that, oh, I'm only going to work from 8 to 3, 8 to 3:30. I'm going to have all my summers off. And that's not really what it is to have that type of servant's heart. You have to have a heart for your craft and what you do professionally. So did you ask me who influenced? What was the other part of the question?
Who influenced your leadership style, and how?
Yeah, I think I've had some really good people around me that I've followed, some really strong leaders that have poured into me some things that I probably needed at the time. I think it's important that you're able to take criticism. That's not always easy. And I think it's important that you're able to balance to make yourself better and not get offended when people are trying to grow you. There is several, books and things that are out there that are really good John Maxwell obviously is one that I respect and listen to. But, you know, there's some podcasts. Ken Blanchard has one called Lead. I think it's Lead Like Jesus, 21 Days of Leadership. And he really does kind of compare the way Jesus led with the way we are, with that humble heart, and being able to be very balanced and not lead with emotion. I think that can sometimes get people into trouble if you're making decisions with emotions and not, you know, looking at the big picture. And yeah, I've just had some really good people around me. And I think that that's what has influenced me, is just watching them, watching what works, being able to sit back and watch. I think sometimes people jump in with both feet without asking questions. That's what's got me into more trouble than anything, I would say, is when I don't ask enough questions before I make a decision.
I want to dig into the humility a little bit and the servant side, because I do think there is sometimes a perception of you can't be humble, you can't be a servant and command respect, and I don't think that could be further from the truth. There are examples all over the place of humble leaders. I think the other part of humility that you hit on was your ability to take criticism. A humble person understands that they are not perfect, right? Only one perfect
Yes,
person.
right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we're not that person. So then ask, you know, I'm a year and a half removed from sitting in that seat. And I continue these podcasts, the things that Nathan sends me to, you know, listen to, just continue to make me realize how much I didn't know for all the time I was in leadership, how much I still have to learn. And so talk a little bit about, and I don't mean this at all in a sexist manner, because
Sure.
some of the strongest leaders I've ever been around have been females. But I would suggest, based on some things I've heard, that ladies feel like they have to be a little more assertive to be respected. So how do you manage that? I have to be assertive to get respect, with I also have to be humble, and I have to be a servant to lead with my heart.
Oh, yeah, that's good. So, you know, I agree with you. There is a difference between men and women, and I think that's a great thing. And I think it's something we should celebrate, instead of, so many times the approach is um, a source of frustration, men and women leaders. And I think I I call that out and say I think that's the wrong approach. Women can be emotional. We have to be very, that is just a nature of our personality. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think you have to surround yourself with people that are not exactly like you. I think you need both. I think you need the women and men to kind of have a full picture and a balance. And if to say that it's one or the other, it is, in my mind, I think you have to know your role. You have to be very honest with yourself and know where your weak areas are. You have to be very confident in your skills and in your gifts. But that doesn't mean that you tear others down, and how they, I think that unfortunately for women, sometimes I've seen that happen, where women come in and try to tear down some of the way some other leaders are, maybe men leaders. And I think that's just not appropriate. I think you could celebrate those that have those gifts, and not say that one way or other is wrong. I think you have to have both. And that's why we were created differently. I don't think we should try to be like, I don't want to lead like some of the men that have been in my circle, because I need that perspective. I need some of those that they have. And in turn, a lot of those have listened to my perspective. It doesn't mean I'm always right. It just means we need all sides. So I don't know if that was exactly the approach, but I do think it needs to be said that being humble and leading with your gifts is not a weakness. It is a strength. And I think we need to celebrate it.
That's good. I as far as resources, I think Craig Groeschel does a great job talking about humility with confidence as well. He's got a podcast and a book called I think it's Winning the War in Your Mind that talks so much about that. I want to piggyback on there a little bit as well, because you are so humble. But one of the things about you, Traci, that I would say is, and on the criticism part is, and I think this is true of all leaders, is you're invitational with the criticism, right? It's not because our body language or our tone and how we do things can have a lot to determine how people are going to interact with us, right? And so, just being invitational to that, making people comfortable. I think you do a fantastic job. But my question is, if you were talking to two groups, one, because this podcast is for many, but one of them is certainly for leaders as a target audience. What advice would you give a female leader in thinking about taking that step? And then what approach would you take? Because obviously there's a lot of males out there that you would want a lot of the male leaders out there to know about interacting with females too.
Well, I think with speaking to other female leaders, I think it's so important to know your lane. If as an assistant superintendent, my lane does not, I need to make sure I'm communicating well with my superintendent. There's a lot of decisions that I make that I need to make sure that we are in alignment. Have to know my role as, as women. Sometimes I get more involved in the emotional stories of families that come in and might want to get special treatment where something, my heart goes out to them, but we have to be consistent. And I think for me, no matter what is going on in the building, for my principals specifically, they need to see me as somebody that they can trust to be even keel. And I think that is a practiced thing. I don't think sometimes that doesn't come naturally. I think sometimes you have to make sure that you are not getting emotionally involved. You are making decisions based on consistency, board policy, and that is important, even when my heart goes out to someone. And I think that is something when I'm meeting with families or principals who's had some tough situations, and we've had some over the years, being able to be empathetic, but yet be strong for them and in the direction that they're going. I think that is a good thing that women can bring to the table. But also, again, my job as an assistant is to support the leadership, support my leadership below me and above me. And I think sometimes seeing this, they have to trust you, and they're not going to trust you if you're sharing things or if you're going behind their back or if you're saying things. And I think sometimes because women are so relational, we like relationships. That's just sometimes a natural form. We can share things that we should not. We sometimes work through problems by talking about them. Got to be super careful about that. Talk about it with the people that are in your circle that already you're in the know, but you can't share outside. Your trust will completely be taken away if you're going outside those boundaries. And I can say that as women, sometimes all of these things, again, I wish I could just read a book and they would immediately come and I would go, oh, that's the way I'm going to act. But you know how you learn. You learn by making mistakes. And that's what I have learned, by making mistakes. And again, I think you have to be consistent, good communication, and you have to listen. Again, listening sometimes can be a learned thing as well. one thing also I think I would point out to people is when you're a good listener, it doesn't always mean you're going to agree with someone. I've heard this said before, you didn't listen to me. Oh, I listened to you. I just didn't agree with you. So listening and agreeing is two different things. And I think some people think if you're listening to them, you're going to come to their side of the table. And that's not always the case.
I think one of the things you hit on, just the ability, you can be emotionally involved, but you have to have the courage to step out of that emotion in situations. And sometimes, there have been several situations, but I really think about some of the suspension hearings I sat in and
Yes.
listening to the story and really having the empathy for what led to this. But I was listening to some information, after the recent events, and they were talking about the difference between justice and forgiveness. And I think you get a little bit of that going on here sometimes in the school world where, yeah, we understand, we're empathetic to the situation you're in, but here are the results, the consequences. And that courage is something that male or female you got to have in leadership. And I just, I think the thing you mentioned something about ladies being more emotional and those type of things. But honestly, don't we want emotion in decision making? Don't we want somebody to have investment in that, to be passionate about?
Yes,
That's
that's what I was
the,
thinking.
yeah, that's the only way we can get to the best result
Yes.
if we have some passion about which direction we're going. But yeah, just I mean, good advice for any young leader. And the other thing that I'll just touch on that I think is so impactful, and you're coming from the accounting background, I came from the same. You learn quickly in that profession confidentiality. I mean, nobody wants their finances shared, right? And so there have been so many times in my career where my wife or my daughter who worked in the system where I was superintendent, somebody would come and ask, "Well, what do you know about this?" "Well, I don't know anything about it." And people wouldn't believe them. But there were some things that I didn't share. I mean, I didn't try to share anything with my daughter, but there were a lot of things I didn't share with my wife because I just didn't want her to be in the position to have to say, I don't know, and actually be not telling the truth. So, yeah, for a young leader, that confidentiality is how you build trust, how you get people to have confidence they can share with you. Good
Yes.
stuff.
And even amongst your team, when someone is sharing something, um, if they were to go and share it with another, and then it gets back that, oh, Traci's talking about me to other, and it happens. And I guess the other thing in leadership that I didn't realize until is how small the circle gets when you get into administration. You run into the same people, just in a different district or a different role. It's just amazing. And the difference in, I would say, even as a high school principal, I was a high school principal, I was a SPED director before I took this role as an assistant superintendent. And even as a high school principal, our collaboration within high school principals was very competitive. We athletics, of course, we would lots of bantering that goes on. But when I moved into this seat, my role became much more collaborative than it did. I needed my other assistant superintendents to keep track of all the deadlines and the things that were going on. Not that we don't banter and we don't go back and forth, but I'm going to banter, but man, I want to make sure I need you right beside me to make sure we're not missing anything together. And it is a different role. And I've noticed the people that come into this role that maybe went from that type of environment, it's a little bit of a learning curve.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
There's another case of where humility can strike, right? Understanding that um, I'm gonna need somebody to collaborate with because this competition thing at this level. And at the end of the day, I think that's always been the silly thing is I don't care where the kid's from. We want all kids to be successful.
Yes.
We talk about academic scores, and unfortunately, we live in a place where the best thing we can do is collaborate about what's working well. And yet, so often when we have an assessment system that ranks, it doesn't end up that way. And so, if something great is working for me, then what's the benefit of helping another district out if that's how we're going to get rewarded? And so, really exposing a flaw in the system and having to realize that, look, I don't care if you're from Cassville, I don't care if you're from another state, I don't care where you're from. They're all our kids, and we want all kids to be successful.
I
Um,
agree. That's true. And
completely.
I think when we're in a middle of a tough decision or I think if bringing that back, what's best for the student? What's best for our kids? 100%. Sometimes you can get clarity by just asking that question.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad Nathan they hit on that because, one of the things I think is frustrating, and when I was younger, I'll admit I was more competitive. It was more, bring glory to me or to our school or whatever. But a couple of things you mentioned as you go up the ladder, it gets a little lonelier. So you need those friends and you start reaching out and you learn that we're all in the same boat. We're all trying to do the same thing. And in the day that we're in now, those students in Carthage and Webb and Carl and Joplin very likely could be in Neosho next year, or our kid could be in one of their districts or in Cassville. And you begin to wonder, am I serving students, whether they're in my district or somebody else's district, in the role that I am, or am I serving my own personal mission of where is my next job? How am I going to be able to advance because I led this great school? And you really have to go back to your original humility. Who am I serving and for what purpose? Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
Tracy, you and I, we're both assistants, and so I think you're the first. Although Jim, you were an assistant as well? Okay, so
Yeah, two times.
if you're a superintendent, you are still a little bit of I don't know, middleman, but you've always got somebody above and below you. And so at superintendent, you've got the board who you're collaborating, communicating with, and you have those that you're serving. And so assistant superintendent is no different. Talk to us a little bit more about that role. What are some of the unique perspectives or responsibilities that come with serving as an assistant, and how do you see your role completing the work of the superintendent and the district as a whole?
I really love my job. I do love this role. This is, for me, it's a good fit in my personality and my balance with my home and my work relationship. Um, and again, going back to making sure, because decisions come across my desk all the time, that I need to make sure I know where's my lane. And sometimes that's where I have gotten outside. What is my lane? What is my superintendent's lane, Dr. Johnson? So when there's times that decision has to be made now. Can't wait. That just happens sometimes. Making sure that I'm communicating well, making sure that I'm making the decision of, is this a decision that I should not be making? That's when I get into trouble, making sure that I know that it's something that needs to be on someone else's plate versus mine, and being humble enough to know the difference. Because sometimes people come in and want to do things that are outside. And I'm not saying I'm always perfect at that. I definitely make mistakes when it comes to that area. And the other thing that gets different is if my superintendent changes, then the expectation changes of what they view my role to be. So making sure I'm asking questions and developing that relationship so that I pretty much can can tell what their decision would be when they're not able to make it. I would make it. And then, I see really one of my main jobs is making sure I'm developing the principals that are under me, making sure that the principals in our building, when you start talking about are confident in what they're doing, this role, we've talked before, Nathan, that this role as building leaders has changed over the years. They are not managerial anymore. They are the learning leaders of the building. So how can I develop and expose them to things that allow them to be confident in the direction we're going instructionally with students? It's not just about the schedule and managing people. It's more about managing the learning. And that changes my role, I feel like, in developing that. And I am so proud of the principals in this building and the work that they do. So proud of them. And they really have stepped up to that challenge, because it has been a switch. There's a difference in education today than it was just 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
bring up. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, and I mean a couple of things there. I hope your lesson in that was easier than mine, because I got that assistant superintendent role, and I thought I was going to work with teachers and sometimes overcoming some leadership that was had some room for improvement, and understanding that like the proximity isn't there enough. And so we really have to pour into those leaders, and then getting to the point where as far as that changing, one of the things we talk about at Lifted, or just overall, and they don't go over this in our master's courses, is when we rank the top 4 competencies that actually lead to student achievement for principals. Number 1 is their interpersonal skills. Number 2 is their strategic and analytical thinking. And then we get to that instructional leadership piece. And then we get to managerial. And so understanding that we have to pour into them, the principals are our gatekeepers, and understanding how to pour into them. And if it's interpersonal skills, and it's, sometimes we have principals that are really skilled in instruction, but they don't know how to sell that, and they don't know how to listen, or they, and like, hey, the whole piece, let's work on those things. So great stuff.
Yes, that is perfect.
Yeah, and I was going to ask the question, because that is the role that Nathan served. I think I'm hearing that you served that same role of really pouring into district leadership at the building level. But you also mentioned that you're working under different superintendents. Give advice to listeners that have had superintendent changes or multiple changes. How do you continue to keep your purpose and work with new leadership and maybe their thoughts? How's that worked for you?
I think it's important to be adaptable. I mean, you have to pivot sometimes within the expectations of that leader. It's sometimes difficult to know. And so again, I think it goes back to developing a relationship and asking a lot of questions. We've had in our district, changes at that level here as well. And it was an adjustment to know the difference in leadership style. Every time that happens, there's going to be an adjustment, knowing the roles, knowing kind of what the expectation. Everybody has a different, in this role. This role is so different by district to district, and assistant is different. And so knowing what I think my lane is, knowing what they think my lane is 2 different things. Even the principals coming in, knowing what my lane is and what their lane is, kind of having to go through it. When I get a new principal, we definitely have to sit down and talk about what that looks like. Because on the outside, they may think they know, but again, every district is different. It has to be. And emails, that was, you guys know, we've talked about this. Sometimes you have to have a conversation. Emails do not get it done. Sometimes it has to just be. That's why I love podcasts. I think you kind of get the tone we talked about earlier, the body language. You can't get that in an email.
Absolutely. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here because one of the things that's so big to Nathan and I, and I guess part of our mission moving forward is how do we help leaders, help any educator love their job, fill their bucket, come to work fulfilled in the work that they're doing, not dreading it. So things like how do you unload your backpack at the end of the week or end of the day? Tell us a little bit about just how does Traci keep that balance of personal life, work life, spiritual life? I mean, you raised kids while you were going through this process. We all have. What is your method for keeping that balance?
Well, obviously, I mean, for me, prayer is a huge part. When I'm having a specifically difficult situation, there's been times when I've prayed all the way to work. Lord, just help me to keep my mouth shut, or Lord, help me when whatever does come out is not going to be tearing people down, because that's what our obvious nature is to try to elevate ourselves. That's just nature. It's our person. It's human nature. And so sometimes you got to have some help going against what you feel like you are entitled to. The other thing is, for me, giving myself some grace. It's okay to not be able to do everything perfectly. It is okay to be more focused in an area and not, because we all spread ourselves too thin. It happens. And I think sometimes when I'm feeling a lot of anxiety, reflecting on, okay, what is causing that? Let's just reflect and what is causing me that anxiety? Because sometimes if I'm able to identify it, which of these things, because when you're spread and you got 10 things on your plate all coming together at the same time, if you can isolate it into which thing is causing me the most anxiety and deal with that one thing, sometimes that is I'm able to let go. I also have a right here, I have my Bible. There are times when I shut my door and I just need to kind of decompress. And there are days when that is needed. You've got to go sometimes outside of what's going on in your life and take a moment. And I think it's okay to do that. I think we don't allow ourselves the grace to be able to have those moments, and we need them.
So how did you set boundaries for your work life and your time as a parent? Because I mean, we all have, I mean, strong type A personalities, leadership type people become a little bit of workaholics. I mean, if we're
Yes.
honest. So
Yeah.
how did for that young listener or even a mature listener, how did you set boundaries for when the school day was going to end?
So actually, this is funny. My very first year teaching, I'm going to go back. That's how I learned this lesson so early. First year teaching, I was actually teaching middle school math. The grading in middle school math can totally take over your life. And I was sitting at a ball game, at one of my kids' ball games. I don't know. Dr. Cummins may have been reffing it. Who knows? Sitting at a basketball game, grading papers. And Lance Massey comes up to me and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, I have got to grade these papers. This is important. And he goes, "No, it's not. Your time and your family, you need to know the balance of what can wait, or not everything needs to be graded. You need to find a way to be more efficient with your time." I'm like, "But I think it is important that I grade every single one of these." And he goes, "No, it's not. You need to prioritize some things." And I guess having someone point out that to me specifically, that it's okay to sit and enjoy my family and have that balance. Somebody in his position giving me that license. And to be honest, he wasn't even my superintendent at the time. My kids went to school there. I was working for a different district. And I just felt like, hey, you're right. This is, you do have to, every situation is different in what you're going through, but family is important. And if as long as you are putting the priorities where they need to be And I think everyone knows you can 100% put a family first and still be driven in your career. 100%. It's not one or the other. You really can. You just can't do, you can't say yes to everything. You have to prioritize. I don't know. I would like to hear your answer to that. I would love to hear your answer to that question.
Well, yeah. Got better as I got a little bit mature.
Yes.
I think back now to the days when I was coaching and teaching when I first came into the profession, and three young kids at home, and Renee teaching as well full time, and grading, like you said, cooking dinner, and just all that she took on. And so as I did mature, and as the girls started to get into activities, and we've talked about this on other podcasts. Nathan knows I just came to that point where I might have to get up at 4 a.m. to get the work done that I needed at school, but I wasn't going to miss their activities. And what I try to get young leaders to understand is you owe it to your district to be the best you can be, but that district will not remember you when you're 60, when you're 70, when you're 80, but your kids still will, your family still will, your friends still will. And so you have to put that perspective in things, and not, orphan your children for a district. Nathan,
Yeah.
what are you?
Yeah,
You had to
Nathan.
do the same thing, raising four boys, or Jen raising five boys.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of a couple things. One, we've talked about this. I always appreciated you modeling that, um, leaving the office and cover for each other, to go to make sure that we didn't miss those, and that I'll forever be grateful for that. And there's finding those times to get the work done, because the work has to be done. That tension of, you can't just turn it, like, what we do is too important. This isn't like, um, we're making widgets, which widgets are important too, but you can still have accountability, high expectations, and good perspective on doing the work and doing it well, and take care of your your personal needs. And you talked about it a little bit early, and this has been a reflection even over the past year that I would give for um, leaders, is those times where I probably felt some of the most anxious were those times where I was probably out of order and alignment with something, right? And so, if you're when I look back on those things, like, oh, I was probably a little bit too heavy into work that time, or I was a little bit too heavy into this that time, and understanding that anytime that the order of, my relationship with God, my wife, my kids, and then my or family and job, anytime that's going to cause some internal, and it's not like we can avoid it all of the time, but if it's there for a long time, we really have to, like, where's the order at right now? And so, that I probably wish I would have known that earlier on, because for me, and you guys are the same way, like, I'll just wake up at 3 and grind through, or I'll just, and it's good.
Don't you think, Nathan, sometimes God puts those circumstances to move you in places? I mean, sometimes there's a force working behind to move you in a direction that he wants you. And we're happy. I know I just, one of my family members just got moved, and he said, I would have never left. I loved what I was doing. And if it wasn't that this situation came up to move me, I would have never moved. And now things are better than I could have even, the position I'm in now, the job that I'm working now is so much better. And I think that happens sometimes.
Absolutely. I never would have made any of the moves I ever made um, without a gentle nudge or jackhammer
Yes, yes.
that God had provided. But if we're going to be willing servants and obedient, then we also had to be prepared for that. And so, well, I don't plan
Yeah.
on doing this, but I'm going to be ready just in case. And so
Yeah.
I can say, hey, we know that all good things work for those that love him. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
looking back, seeing, and then in those valleys, like, I don't know how this is going to work for good, but I'm excited when it gets there.
When it gets,
I hope it comes. The whole reason why comes out soon because it's painful to get there sometimes, though.
Absolutely. So,
looking back now, your journey, I mean, you're a veteran. What
Oh, that's hard to
advice,
believe.
what one piece of wisdom would you leave us with for our listeners that so they can continue to grow in their impact?
My hope is that people love what they do. I mean, what we have some of the greatest people in education. They are, for the most part, there for the right reasons. Most people that are going, and I know that it gets hard sometimes to see that because the ones that aren't seem to sometimes be louder. But continuing to find the joy in what you do every day and continuing to know that you are here for a reason, that you were put in this position for a reason, whoever it is that you are to impact. Because, who knows the kind of lives that we can impact in education. We have the ability to mold some of these students. And I think just keeping them at the focus that, man, what we do is important work. What we do is lasting. It doesn't matter how long. Sometimes if you get around a group of people, they immediately start telling stories about when they were in school. And someday, and it's actually we're in that day where you get around, they start telling stories about things that you did or said as they interacted with you as a student. And I just hope and pray that when those days come, that it's with fond, growing them in the right ways and continuing to bring joy and remembering the why. We have to remember our why.
Oh, that's awesome. Anything, Nathan, before I try to land this thing?
no, it's another Tracy. We just deeply appreciate you coming on with us today.
I'm excited for this whole adventure that God has put in your path. It definitely was not by accident. It's a dream team right here. You guys got it going on.
Thank you, Tracy.
I appreciate that, and for sharing your leadership journey and just your insights, both the perspective of a female administrator, but also assistant superintendent. And it is a different role. And
Mhm.
it's not that it's not a leadership. It's absolutely leadership. It's just a different role, and you still have the ability to impact the people around you, and your personality, your spirit is just infectious. And I know that when you talk about spreading that joy and the impact that not only the kids will come back and tell you stories, but there are going to be times when administrators come back and tell you how you lifted them up in a time where they were down. And so absolutely, education has just a tremendous opportunity and responsibility to impact people. And so, thanks for sharing with us. Thanks for what you do, and
Thank
tell your family hello for us. And as always, if your district needs sustained leadership coaching, financial support, professional development, Nathan and I would be happy to visit with you about how Lifted can partner in your work. Um, and we would love to continue to support, but we will continue to bring leaders on to encourage you, to help motivate you, to give you just some tools for your belt that will help you to continue to be great leaders. So until next time, be well and keep leading with purpose beyond the bell. Thank you.